And Mike Rowe is the creator and executive producer and host of Discovery Channel's Dirty Jobs.
That's true.
My wife thinks you're terrific.
Your wife has excellent taste, Senator. Thank you. Give her my regards.
I will.
And thank you officially for having me here today. It really is a thrill and an honor. One small thing, the credits for the show are very kind. In truth, I'm more of a guest. I assume the role of an apprentice on Dirty Jobs, and for the last 7 years or so, I've traveled to every state and worked in just about every industry with people you would otherwise never get a chance to know. They're anonymous folks, many times in small towns you wouldn't find on a map, who do the kinds of jobs that make civilized life possible for the rest of us. In the history of TV, it's probably the simplest show ever, but there's some very big themes that run through Dirty Jobs. And over the last 6 or 7 years, I've personally had a front row seat, and I've watched the headlines catch up to a lot of those themes. Thus, the simplest show in TV has become interesting in a way that I never anticipated or intended. I could talk certainly at length about any of the people I've met in the show, and I'm tempted to, but I'd rather take a small portion of my 5 minutes and tell you about my grandfather, because he's the reason ultimately that I decided to come here today. His name was Carl Noble, and he made his living in Baltimore as a master electrician. He was also a plumber and a mechanic, mason, carpenter. Everybody knew him as a jack of all trades. And I remember him mostly as a magician. For most of his life, my granddad woke up clean, and he came home dirty. And in between, he accomplished some things that were nothing short of miraculous to me. Some days he might reshingle a roof or rebuild a motor, run electricity, out to the barn. He helped build the church that I went to as a kid and the farmhouse that I grew up in. Basically, he could fix or build anything, but to my knowledge, he never once read the directions to anything. He just knew how stuff worked. I remember one Saturday morning when I was 12, I flushed the toilet in the same way I had been flushing it for 12 years. The toilet, however, responded in a way that was completely out of character. There was a rumbling sound followed by a distant gurgle, and then everything that had gone down reappeared in a rather violent and spectacular fashion. Naturally, my granddad was called in to investigate, and within the hour, I was invited to join he and my father, who's right behind me there, out in the front yard for about 12 hours of forced labor. There was pipe welding, and there was picks, and there was shovels, and there were blisters and laughter and maybe some questionable language. But by sunset, we were completely filthy. The new pipe was installed, the dirt was back in the hole, and our toilet was back on its best behavior. And it was one of my favorite days ever. 30 years later in San Francisco, my toilet blew up again, and this time I didn't participate in the repair process. I just called my landlord, and I left a check on the kitchen counter, and I went to work. And when I came home, the mess was cleaned up and the problem was solved. As for the actual plumber who did the work, I never even met him. It never occurred to me to meet him. What did occur to me that day was the fact that I had become disconnected from a lot of things that really used to fascinate me growing up. I no longer thought about where my food came from or how my electricity worked or who fixed my pipes or who made my clothes. I didn't think about who made anything. There was no reason to. I was less interested in how things got made, in fact, and more interested in how things got bought. Well, at this point, my granddad was well into his 80s. After a long visit with him one weekend, I decided to do a TV show in his honor. Now, today, Dirty Jobs is still on the air, and I'm here before you guys hoping to say something useful. So here it is. I believe that we need a national PR campaign for skilled labor, like a big one, something that addresses the widening skills gap head on and reconnects the country with the most important part of our workforce. Right now, American manufacturing is struggling to fill 200,000 vacant positions, I'm told. And there are 450,000 openings today in trades, transportation, and utilities. The skills gap seems real, and it's getting wider. In Alabama, a third of all skilled tradesmen are now over 55. They're retiring fast, and there's really nobody there to replace them. Alabama's not alone. A few months ago in Atlanta, I ran into Tom Vilsack, our Secretary of Agriculture. Tom told me about a governor he knows who was unable to move forward on the construction of a new power plant. The reason I thought was fascinating. It wasn't a lack of funds or a lack of support. It was a lack of qualified welders. In general, people are surprised that high unemployment can exist at the same time as a skilled labor shortage, but they shouldn't be. We've pretty much guaranteed it. In high schools, the vocational arts have all but vanished, and we've elevated the importance of higher education to such a lofty perch that all other forms of knowledge are now labeled as alternative. Millions of parents and kids see apprenticeships and really valuable on-the-job training opportunities as vocational consolation prizes, best suited for those not cut out for a four-year degree. And still, we talk about creating millions of shovel-ready jobs for a society that doesn't really encourage people to pick up a shovel. In 100 different ways, I think we've slowly marginalized an entire category of critical professions, reshaping our expectations of a good job into something that no longer looks like work. A few years from now, an hour with a good plumber, if you can find one, is going to cost more than an hour with a good psychiatrist, at which point we'll probably all be in need of both. I wanted to come here today because guys like my granddad are no less important to civilized life than they were 50 years ago. Maybe they're in shorter supply today because we don't acknowledge them the way that we used to. We leave our check on the kitchen counter and hope the work gets done. Well, that needs to change. My written testimony includes the details of several initiatives designed to close the skills gap, all of which I've had the privilege to participate in. Go Build Alabama, I Make America, my own modest efforts through Dirty Jobs and Micro Works. I'm especially proud, though, today to announce Discover Your Skills. It's a broad-based initiative from Discovery Communications that I think can change perceptions in a really meaningful way. I encourage you to support these efforts because closing the skills gap doesn't just benefit future tradesmen and the companies who are desperate to hire them. It benefits people like me and anyone else who shares my addiction to paved roads, reliable bridges, heating, air conditioning, and of course indoor plumbing. Something for all of us to consider perhaps during the next bathroom break.
I have a smart wife.
Thank you.
I failed to announce that there is a vote at 3 o'clock, which was very unchairman-like of me, and I apologize. I'm going to miss it and stay here so that we can keep things going, and others probably should go vote. Yeah, and then come back if you can, okay?
I'll vote.
Can't.
No.
Can't. You can try, but you can't.